This is Tyrese Halliburton, and you're listening to Setting the Pace.
Joining us now on Setting the Pace, he is no stranger to Indiana fans. He is the former head coach of the Indiana Hoosiers and current college basketball analyst at ESPN, Tom Crean. Coach, how you doing?
I'm great. It's good to be with you two guys. So thank you.
Yeah, we're excited to have you on, and it's been a good time here for Pacer Nation because one of your former players, Thomas Bryant, has been a huge part of this team's success over the last 20 games. They're 15-5 to be exact. And I'm just curious, how do you think Thomas has fit in with this group?
Well, I think he's happy. I think he's excited. I think he feels wanted. I think he feels actually needed, and I think which is really important. He loves the defense. I think anytime you can feel useful, because the money's great and the travel's great and all that stuff's great, but when you're a competitor and when you want to play, you want to play meaningful minutes and you want to be useful to the team. And I think that's exactly how he feels. And I think that's when he plays at his best. And I think what everybody else is seeing is that energy level, that enthusiasm, that's not only real, that's contagious. And I think the fans can feel that. They always could at Indiana. When he played for us, I've not seen or heard of many people that didn't enjoy him being a teammate and didn't enjoy being around him every day, because he's a fun guy. Certainly, like anybody else, he can hit his moments, but the bottom line is this guy loves basketball. He loves being a part of a team. He loves to play. And I think he just is constantly in a situation where he wants to prove what he can bring to a team. I mean, when you look at his path, when I left, he left, and he spends that first year playing for the G League Lakers as much as or more than he played for the Lakers. I think he averaged 20 some odd points. He goes to the Wizards. He sets I think he still holds the all-time single-season field goal percentage record in Wizards history. And then all of a sudden, the next year, he gets hurt really, really early and misses the year. And I mean, he's had so many good moments with the Lakers. Ends up going to Denver, wins a ring, doesn't really have the role that he would have liked, but he got the ring. And Miami, it was a little up and down, but he loves being in Indy, and I know he loves being back in the state.
You talked about various different opportunities that he's had in past destinations. When he's had the opportunity, he has produced. This is a guy who's averaged double-digit scoring, numerous times in his career, and maybe didn't have the right opportunity in Miami, but definitely had that chance to make an impact in Indiana. And it didn't take more than maybe a couple of minutes for this fan base to really fall in love with him. He's proven to be a solid backup big in this league, bounced around a couple different, spots. But do you think maybe he could have a fit here long-term in Indiana, because he's going to be a free agent? Miles Turner's a free agent. Indiana doesn't have their center position locked down. Do you think maybe he could find a home in Indiana?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, again, it's going to come down to what Kevin and Rick and people like that in there, Chris, they feel about him. But the bottom line is he can play, right? And he's going to make your team better. And you can depend on him. And he can make shots. And he can make shots from beyond the NBA line. And when I say that, he can pull people out. And he's a competitor. He'll fight. He's not going to take any crap from anybody. I was proud of him the other day when he took that cheap shot in the Spurs game, and he goes to the foul line and he knocks down the shots. The younger Thomas might have come right back after Sandro, right, and been going right back at him. But you know what? He's matured. He knew he was going to the foul line. He didn't like it, but he didn't overly respond. And I didn't talk to him before they went to Paris or since he's been back, but watched the games. And especially that when I was in the studio at ESPN. And I was really proud of that moment, because he's really high octane, he's high energy, he's high motor. And with some of that comes high emotion, right? He can play emotionally. And I think you want a guy that has that kind of motor, and now the maturity of it, being able to not play emotionally when it's getting it to a fever pitch like that is really, really good. So I think he'd be happy there. I think the way people appreciate basketball and appreciate what he did at Indiana would be huge. People forget that not only did we lose OG Anunoby his sophomore year, we lost 18 games with OG Anunoby. But Juwan Morgan got hurt the week before in the Rutgers game. He collided with a referee, and his ankle ended up being not a situation that he had to sit down, but a situation where he couldn't fully be what he needed to be throughout the week. So he was hardly practicing for us, or hardly practicing full for us that sophomore year. So you don't have a close to 100% Juwan Morgan. You have no OG Anunoby. We weren't getting great production in the backcourt as much. That put a lot of pressure on Thomas to play well. And so you start the year and you've got OG healthy, you've got Juwan healthy, you've got Thomas Bryant, and some of those things changed. And so he got a lot done, but he also got a lot more attention from the opponent. And I think he's dealt with everything. You know, he's been a starter in that league. He's been a backup in that league. He's had weeks of DNPs in that league. He built his way up through the G League. He started all those games for the Wizards. You know, he's been through everything, and he's only 27. And so when you look at him, I think there's still a lot of upside in his career, and he just needs to find a niche, and he needs to feel where he's going to be useful, and he trusts himself more. He trusts his decisions more. He doesn't listen to outside people as much anymore about what's best for him. And I think that's really, really important as well. All players go through that.
Yeah, you kind of touched on it early on there with that answer, but you talked about just the energy that he plays with. And I think one thing that I've noticed since he's been here with the Pacers is just the constant energy, whether he's in the game or whether he's on the bench. And I'm curious, how does a spirited player with positive energy impact a team's culture?
Oh, tremendously. Because, again, I don't know the inner workings of their team, but I watched them a lot. They didn't seem like they had anybody like him. You know, they've got enforcers like James Johnson. They've got really good players. They've got skilled players. They've got guys that can play 5 out. They've got young players that are trying to find their way. They've got emerging stars, but they didn't have that one guy that can change the energy level of the team just by being who he is. And I think that's what you get with Thomas. And he's an electric player, man. I mean, he really is. And the fact that he's skilled, the fact that he will compete, the fact that he's tough, but also the fact is, and we can go back even to the Denver days for this, when he went to Denver and he thought he was going to play more for them, inside of that deal that they made with the Lakers, and he probably should have never left the Lakers. And he was playing extremely well at times for the Lakers that year, and then Anthony Davis came back. So he goes to Denver, but once he realized, like, I'm not getting a lot of minutes, he was still a great teammate on that team. I mean, you could see it with his teammates. So that's where I said, again, he's gone through so many things in his career. He appreciates what it means to be an NBA player. He appreciates what it means to be needed, and he appreciates what other people do. And I think that is what you want your culture to be, right? Because your culture is not controlled by the coaches. Your culture is maybe held accountable by the coaches, but your players are the ones that establish or let down the culture. They really do. And it's so important that there's standards that need to be met, and the players hold each other to a place of that. Well, in a long season, you've got to have some levity with that. You've got to have some enjoyment with one another. And I think Thomas brings that.
This fan base loves their Hoosiers, whether it was years ago, wanting Eric Gordon to be a Pacer, or whether it was having Victor Oladipo here,
Sure.
or, we wanted OG as a Pacer for quite a few years, the last few years. Now, Thomas Bryant is an Indiana Pacer. How much do you think that means to him and some other alumni of the past that got to play at IU and Indiana?
Well, I think because of the fact, Eric lived there, obviously, but Victor would come back to Indiana. Thomas would come back to Indiana. OG would come back to Indiana. And those guys, they weren't Indiana natives. So I think that says a lot about it. I think they felt very, very comfortable at Indiana. And I always pushed that, especially after I left. I didn't want guys like OG and Thomas and those kind of guys to not feel good about going back there. I might have left, but that was still their school. And I felt the same way when I left Marquette for Indiana. You want those people to feel appreciated, to feel involved and included, but you want them to obviously know that that's their home. Even though their coach isn't there, that's your home, right? That's your second home. And I think Indiana fans have done a phenomenal job of that. They make people feel that way. Those guys like going back there to a basketball game or to a weekend, or go back and lift in the weight room, or go see somebody. and it's really, really important. And so to me, I think Thomas had a really good experience in the state of Indiana. I think people were very respectful of him. They liked him. They respected the way he played, how he conducted himself. And the bottom line is when he comes back in there, they remember that. And then you see him make jump shots and you see that excitement and that energy, and it rekindles as a fan. Hey, this guy hasn't changed. He's only better. And I think that's important.
As a coach, I'm sure you talk to a lot of your players and currently in the league or former in the league. But with Thomas, how often do you talk to him, and maybe what is some of the advice that you've given him over the years that you've seen him kind of take and make him a better player?
Well, what happens more than anything is it's a lot of texting unless I really need to get a point across to them. And so, like for me, when I need to get something through to somebody, I would rather it be in person, but that's not always possible. But I want it to be on the phone. And so Thomas and I in the past have had some of those conversations, but we also have way more texting. And it's with all those guys like that because they're so busy. But if I have something that I definitely need to make sure that they hear me on or that I see, because I can text and send video all the time, and I do that. And it's as I've known all along, I may not be their coach as far as currently coaching them on how to play on their team, but I'm always going to be their coach when it comes to what they do best, when it comes to their life, when it comes to their personal life, their family, what happens when problems come about, all those different things. And so you don't change that. But with Thomas, really, when he came to Indiana, because a lot of times some of the teams that have traded for him or signed him, they would get a hold of me ahead of time. So I would see things coming, and they might do some background check. Well, I didn't have any of that with Indiana. So I was as surprised as anybody, but I was as excited as anybody because he was going basically back to a second home. And I think that was really, really important. I don't think they'd have made the move if they didn't need him. I don't think they'd have made the move if they didn't have a plan for him at that point in time. And he just needed to go in there and embrace it. And the biggest message is always be yourself, be a great teammate. And now more or less the conversations become about why are you guys so good at this or why are you so good at that? Like defensively, he loves it, right? He loves the schemes of the way they're defending. And he thinks from everything he's gathered there, the communication defensively has picked way up on that team. So when you hear something like that from him, then it just becomes a reminder to keep making sure that he's a huge part of that.
I love it. Once a coach, always a coach, no matter
Absolutely.
how many years it's been. I definitely respect that.
And I'm not trying to coach, there's been many times, not in Thomas's case with Indiana, but there's been many times that I've helped the present coach out more and they didn't even know it, right? Like it's just like because you're dealing with these guys on such a personal level. And everybody says, well, when they leave you, you become their friend. Well, maybe, but here's how they know you. They know you as their coach, right? So I'm not trying to change who I am with them, right? I'm not trying to change how I have been with them when I coached them. We just don't see each other like that, right? We don't talk on a daily basis like that. But you don't stop being somebody that will tell them the truth, somebody that will point out strengths and weaknesses, and someone that will help them adjust to what they have to do inside of the team. Because most of my days are spent, and it was like this when I was coaching. My days are spent studying the game, whether I was studying opponents, studying our own team when I was coaching. Now it's all the studio work, and then whether it's games, with ESPN, games I have with NBC, or now a radio game I have this weekend with Westwood when I have North Carolina at Duke. You're constantly studying college basketball. Well, at night, I want to watch them. I want to watch the NBA at night. And 9 times out of 10, I'm going to watch the NBA at night, and I'm going to watch the college stuff on tape, in the morning and in the afternoon. And so I get a chance to watch all those guys as much as I possibly can. And then I'll make edits for them, or you didn't do this or you didn't do that. And there's a different relationship with all of them. They're all at different places in their career. And so it's important that you have a working knowledge of what they're going through on a continual basis so that you can help them best you can.
I think it's a perfect, segue into, talking about the Pacers in general. You mentioned you love to watch those NBA games at night. Well, Thomas Bryant on the Pacers, I would imagine you're watching a little bit more Indiana
Sure.
Pacers than maybe
Yeah.
in the past. What have you enjoyed seeing for this team that is really playing great basketball right now, especially since the calendar turned to 2025, as well as the run that they had to the Eastern Conference Finals last year? What do you think kind of makes this team feel special or fun to watch?
Well, Tyrese Halliburton is better.
Mhm.
And whatever the reason is, he's better. Whether it's playing harder, whether it's playing better defense. And I think it's really easy to look at him and look at the summer. The one thing that with the Pacers is it didn't look like there were a bunch of guys that made big jumps in the offseason. And Halliburton, the reason I think so much of it is, I mean, how much did they really practice? I mean, like, how much did he really have a chance to train? He didn't play on the Olympic team as much. So once they left Las Vegas, I'm sure they hardly, I mean, we went through it with Anthony Edwards. I mean, I'm sure they did not practice that much with all those veterans on that team. So he's not only, he's in the Olympics, and that's great and all, but he's not really practicing a lot, and he's not really playing much. And then you come back and you want to get a little bit of a break before you go into training camp. So, like, when did he really have a chance? And I think what's happening is, and I don't know him, I certainly know of him and have met him, but the bottom line is he looks better now. So they've done a really good job, I think, of improving their team. They've gotten them way more serious about what has to happen defensively. There's much less empty possessions. I think the shot selection has improved. And I hate to call it a seriousness, but there's more of serious is not the right word. Urgency is probably a better word. There's more of an urgency with what they're doing right now from my vantage point, from how I see it. And I think that's a good thing.
I'm going to go back to some other players you've coached that aren't just Pacers, but Dwyane Wade,
Sure.
Victor Oladipo, Anthony Edwards, three special talents. I'm just curious, did you ever realize this early in their development, wow, this is going to be a very special player in the NBA? And I mean, is there something that maybe stands out about those three specifically that kind of gave you that, intuition, these guys might be a little bit different?
Well, Dwyane and Victor were more similar because they were so under recruited, and they came in, without any hype. They came in. I mean, Dwyane had 3 scholarship offers, and then he got 2 at the very end before he committed to us. Victor had 1 high major offer. I mean, there were other people. I love all the people now that say that they were recruiting Victor or that they wanted Victor, and I never saw him at any of the games, right? Or at DeMatha or at the AU games. I never saw those people, right? It's revisionist history, right? And so to me, they were different. Now, Anthony, you knew, because we got him a year early, we knew we were getting somebody we weren't going to have very long. So you could see when you were recruiting him, there was a specialness, but there was also a lot of maturing that had to happen in a very short period of time. So the other guys, you could work through it and build them up. And there were always moments where they showed you that specialness. Dwyane, the year that he sat out, we started to see different things. And then the first year that we play, we're over in the Great Alaska Shootout, and we're playing Tennessee, and I think we're down 11 at half. We end up winning the game by 13. I think he had 31 or 34 points, and he ends up winning MVP of the Great Alaska Shootout in his 5th college game. So okay, now you got something different here. And Victor, I'll never forget, we knew Victor was getting better and better. But Victor's sophomore year, the night before the Super Bowl, Verdell Jones III gets hurt in the Michigan game, okay, on a Wednesday night. We come home, we're getting ready to go. We're playing Purdue on a Saturday night. We have not beaten them. Victor has to take the role of really being in the middle pick and roll, because I could talk about this forever, but we always had a lot of guards, different guards when we were good. But you almost have to, everybody had different things that they were really good at. So you're building all their weaknesses during practice and during individual workouts. But when you get to the game now, you got to play to the strengths. So Victor was emerging as a middle of the floor guard, as a middle of the floor pick and roll guard, a ball screen guard. And we did a lot of things higher. We always ran things higher because we always played off the NBA line in our practices. And Victor was unbelievable against Purdue that night. I think he had 24. He was unbelievable. They couldn't guard him. They couldn't keep him in front of him in middle pick and roll. And it was almost like, okay, man, we got something right here. right? Like this is what we've been waiting on, because he'd had flashes and he was playing a lot of minutes, but that was the takeoff game for him. And then certainly the next year, there were many takeoff games.
Mm-hmm.
But that game at Purdue, when we beat them that night, on a Saturday night, was a huge, huge thing. Anthony, his freshman year, people talk a lot about the game at Michigan State where he had 38. He probably had 2 practices all year where he just went off like that in practice. But my thing with Anthony, we weren't as good shooting the ball as we needed to be. We thought we were going to have Nick Claxton with him, and we didn't, because Nick had such a good year for us, and he got better and better, and he went from being a 15-minute a game backup 5-man the year before we got there to being a guy that could guard 1 through 5, playing 32 minutes a game, and we had 13 pick and roll plays for him as a center, right? And I don't really call them centers, but he just emerged, right? So we lost him, and rightfully so, because he was ready to go, but that really hurt us without Anthony. And so we had Anthony, we had a kid named Toumani Camara, who's just coming off a 24-point game at Portland the other night. We were starting 3 freshmen that year, and Toumani was really an inside player when we got him, who had to become a much better shooter, and we just didn't have enough pieces around him. And we went 16-16 overall. I think we went, I don't remember what, 5-13, 6 and something in the league. We didn't have a great league, but you could see Anthony was going to be great if he stayed on the right track and if he continued to build into the habits that we were trying to get him to have that year. And he certainly has. And he just keeps getting better and better and better. What's amazing, he just broke the 3-point record the other night in Minnesota, as I'm sure you guys saw. He's 23, right? I mean, he's not even 23 and a half yet. And, he's 4.5 years into this NBA career, and he's already got 970 some odd threes. So all 3 of them are different. All 3 of them have some of the same qualities of empathy for one another, great teammates, want to see their teammates be successful, incredible gym rat guys. I mean, incredible at being in that gym. And they worked, right? They worked. I mean, they absolutely wanted to work. And that's been one of the common denominators of so many of these guys, has been their work ethic, whether it's Nick, whether it's OG Anunoby, Cody. Cody was such a good player that Cody had to learn a lot about extra work if he wanted to be great. And he bought into that. But Cody was so good, right? But for Cody to be as good as he was going to be when he left, and for Cody to do the things he needed to do as a sophomore for us, he had to keep emerging in his ball handling. He had to keep emerging in his driving ability, his passing ability, all those different things. And he did. And so we were very, very fortunate to have guys that had a lot of potential, had a lot of upside, and were willing to work to get it.
First of all, I love your attention to detail and recalling how many points each player scored and what night of the week it was. All that stuff just adds to the story. So I really appreciate that. A lot of the guys you just mentioned ended up being top 5 picks. And then whether they were 0-star recruits, whether they were, talented recruits, whatever it may be. But can you tell me what the recruiting process was like for Anthony Edwards, and any fun stories that maybe come to mind along the line of that recruitment process?
Well, when I got the job at Georgia, one of the big reasons, there were a couple other options that week, and it was a whirlwind week, but I felt really good about that one because I just loved the film of Nick Claxton, and I loved it, right? And this was a guy that played 15 minutes a game, but I wasn't even close to how much upside he had by the time we got into our second workout. Right. But I could see this young freshman. I knew his dad had been a really good player. So when we got in there, I said, okay, we can build some things around Nick Claxton. And we were starting to do that. So watching the film of those guys, but by the 3rd day, we had to make sure that we were making contact with Anthony Edwards' people. Right. And the first day that I could be out to recruit, I went to Indy, actually, because he was playing in an Under Armour tournament in Indianapolis. And I went there to make sure that I saw him, because I said, if we're going to get this kid, and this is when we still thought he had a couple more years, right? Because he ended up skipping his senior year. We've got to make sure we treat him like we're recruiting him right now if we're going to make a dent, because the rumors were heavy that Florida State was in there strong. You knew Auburn was in there, Kentucky. There were a lot of people recruiting him. But if you're going to build a program, you got to take every shot you can to get a kid like that. So we just started being around it. But he came up on an unofficial visit, which was great for us, and spent some time with him. And then we'd get him on the phone a little bit, right? Like it was, you weren't going to whirlwind Anthony Edwards. And one of the things that we had is he was on a visit when Dwyane Wade was up with his son Zaire, because Dwyane was looking at that point to start to take Zaire to different colleges, and he wanted us to be first. Well, we got Anthony Edwards up there at the same time. So Dwyane got to be around him because he'd seen him play in tournaments that Zaire had been in, because they were almost the same age. But hadn't really seen him, right? And so like he's around a little bit. So we started to have this aura of like, hey man, like we developed him, we developed Victor Oladipo. You're not going to be in college long. This is how we can do it. This is what we're going to do. And there was he started to see that. But we still had to withstand a lot of craziness in recruiting. But the thing that we had is he didn't really want to leave home. And his sister, he lost his mother and his grandmother back in the 8th grade. And they basically lived 50 minutes from the campus in Georgia. And he's a homebody, right? He's a homebody. His sister, a couple of his brothers, they raised him. Now, there were some mentors and really good people that helped too. And he became like an Atlanta child, right? Like there were people in Atlanta like, hey, this is our guy, right? And he never looked like a child because he looked like a grown man when he was 16. But like, this is our guy. So he had people that really wanted to look after him. He did not want to be away from his family. And he knew the reality was, okay, you're going to be away from your family here pretty soon, but you don't have to be now. And I think that's what was really, really great for us. And he trusted that we were going to give him the ball. He trusted that we were going to develop him, trusted he could do it close to home. And the only unfortunate thing is we didn't have Nick Claxton with him. But he was great to coach. And I talked to him as much as probably anybody. And a lot of it's texting, but there's times where you need to get him on the phone and he either picks up or calls right back. So it's been a great, great relationship.
Love that. Future face of the league right there. I really do think it's his league in the next few years. And hey, that was a great story. I didn't know all that about his background.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's tough, but he's really weathered a lot of things, and he's really young, right? But there's so many good things about him. So many good things.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think he's one of the most animated players too, and I think that he is just great in the media because he'll give a lot of good sound bites there. But
yeah, sometimes too much. But
yes,
he'll grow through that. He'll grow through that. He's when it comes to work ethic, when it comes to keeping your circle small, when it comes to being a teammate, I mean, he's A+ on those things. He's A+. He's a young guy, and he went into that league at basically. He had just turned 19 because he spent his whole year with us at 18.
Yeah, it's crazy how young
that's a tough run to be first pick in the draft when you just turned 19.
Yeah, it is kind of crazy how young these players are in the league that are kind of becoming the face of it. But Victor Oladipo, obviously that name can kind of be hit or miss here in Indiana now, as Pacer fans have, I don't know if they would say sour, but just the way things ended here weren't great. And just kind of want to go back and relive those moments here when Oladipo was brought to Indiana, really just took this team by storm and just kind of had his breakout moment, led this team to a 7-game series against the Cavs, has that awful injury against the Raptors, never really gets back to who he once was. Pacers eventually trade him. Now, a lot of stuff, and I know Victor has tweeted about it recently, just like the reports that went around about why he left Indiana. But I guess just to kind of give Pacer fans a little bit of closure with the whole Oladipo thing, since you're a little bit closer to him, how did he handle kind of, getting traded from Indiana and just kind of his departure here in terms of like where it started to how it finished?
The old adage, if there's two sides to every story, it's true in everything. And that's exactly, when you're in this situation and you're in Indiana, you're going to get the Pacers view more often than not. And I'm not here to discredit any of that. I would just say this: if Victor had some things he could do over in his own maybe decisions of who was around him, and I don't mean Pacer people, But if he could make probably some decisions differently, like any of us would, he probably would. But as far as not wanting to be there, or as far as not feeling a part of that, I never sensed that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know everything that went wrong. I do know the injury thing was extremely serious. And I know that there were a lot of hurt feelings through those type of things. But it also became, I don't know if we'll ever know all the things that really happened. And I don't know if I will either. And I'm not being evasive at all.
Mm-hmm.
But I do know that some of the things that I've seen reported that came out of there, that's not how I was led to believe it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And again, like, I'm not sitting here saying Victor wouldn't do some things over. I said that. But the bottom line is, he got painted with a tough brush. And Victor loved Indiana. I mean, there was a time, I said this all the time. I said, when we were rolling in Indiana, Cody could run for governor and Victor would be the attorney general, right? And without the law degree, right? That's how popular those guys were in the state of Indiana. And because people identified with them. And Victor did a great job with that. At the end of the day, it's unfortunate that the injury happened the way that it did, and that there wasn't the recovery that was needed from it. And I would say, which happens in most cases, from my outside view of it, is communication was lacking in many areas. And I'm not sure at the end of the day that there was ever let's really sit and get Victor's view of this. And that happens in business sometimes. But the injury's just been so unfortunate that it happened, because obviously he's dealt with so many different things like that. But I would hope that Indiana Pacer fans would give him the benefit of the doubt in different areas. And it's not about, let's blame Victor or let's blame somebody in the Pacers. That's all water under the bridge. Indiana Pacer fans loved him, and he loved playing in there. And it hasn't worked out for him in the way of staying injury free, obviously. And so that's been hard enough. But I hope people would have some compassion for him, some empathy for him, because he really wants to get back into the NBA. And it's not anything that the Pacers didn't do. I mean, he got injured, right? And it was a tough deal to handle. But he loved it there. There's no doubt about that. And good, bad, or indifferent, there were probably some people around him giving him some bad advice at times. And there were also things going on inside of it that he was probably misguided on from inside. And at the end of the day, a great career there really got busted up by an injury more than anything else. And that's what it is more than anything else.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
He could be considered his time in Indiana. You know, I don't know if they have a Pacer Hall of Fame. I'm not saying that, but those couple of years that he was rolling, and the Pacers were rolling with him. And Indiana basketball does not come back without what Victor Oladipo did with us. It does not come back. And he wasn't the only one, obviously, but it does not come back. Because you talk about a culture changer. When he and Will Sheehy came into that program, the culture changed. And both of them were hardly recruited by anybody, and that allowed Jordan Hulls to be Jordan Hulls and Watford to be Watford, and the whole thing turned. And this was even before Cody got there, because that's when it all turned. You know, and Yogi and guys like that. But I could talk about that forever. But Victor Oladipo, you know, it really, at the end of the day, he should end up in the Indiana Basketball Hall of Fame. You know, Cody Zeller's going to be in there. Yogi Ferrell's going to be in there. Victor Oladipo ought to be in there too.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I mean, I think his time here was so special. And unfortunately, like you said, it didn't work out maybe how you wanted it to work out. But in the end, it's water under the bridge. You got to move on from it. The Pacers are in a good spot. And, you know, you hope Vic can get back to, you know, maybe getting back into the league and playing again. But you were just talking about the Hoosiers. And I think, you know, we have a lot of IU fans that listen to this show as well that are also Pacer fans. And you know, I know things are not great right now with Mike Woodson and people are kind of frustrated, but like going back to your time there, how special was it to be the coach of IU? And I guess what kind of challenges are there, you know, with coaching such a prestige program, you know, where there's so many like expectations with that organization, I guess you could say, or school.
Yeah, I didn't want to leave there. I never wanted to leave. That was Fred Glass. And and a couple of the board of trustee members, and that made that decision. I mean, I loved it there, and I've never ever looked at it any other way, because I see the passion. And you know what I even gained? I gained an understanding for why Bob Knight was so upset. And I gained an understanding because when you leave there and you have when you don't leave on your own, and nobody's left on their own, right? There is such a passion-filled base of people that make that program what it is. And I'd like to think that Bob Knight obviously made that happen in a lot of ways. Well, I certainly wasn't good. And Slick Leonard did it with the Pacers, right? Like, this is not about corporate America buying up the seats, and the suites are a part of it. Courtside seats, that's all a part of everything, right? But the grassroots people of Indiana made Indiana basketball. They really made Purdue basketball, and they certainly made the Pacers. Yeah. And so when you're in that realm and you feel a part of that, man, there's nothing like it. And so when you're in it, you want your players to respect and understand that too. And I know we had issues. I mean, there's no question. But every program in America has issues. And ours just had a way of getting leaked out, pretty frequently. And so to be totally honest with you, but it wasn't like some things weren't happening, but they happen everywhere. And the bottom line is we dealt with everything that ever happened, and we were winning while it was going on. And so, because I never wanted those guys that played there to ever take playing for Indiana at granted, playing for the Indiana fans for granted, or getting an education at Indiana University for granted. And that meant there were going to be some hard days, tough days, but you know what? We weren't going to take that for granted, because ultimately that becomes what your culture stands for. And I loved it there. And so when Indiana fans are upset, when Indiana fans are unbelievably passionate and excited, man, that's what it is. There's nothing like it, because of all the programs in the country, and I felt like this all the time, when you talk about pure ownership of a program, not who gives the most money, not who gives the most NIL money now, not who buys the most seats, but the ownership of the program was the state of Indiana grassroots people. The people from all the communities, all the counties, all the different areas, they were the reason. And Bob Knight knew it, and they might have known it before with Branch McCracken, but I sure as heck knew it, and I loved it. And so it was awesome to be a part of that.
Well said, Coach. Honestly, I'm fired up right now after hearing that. I really am. For the last question that I got for you is, you talked about your time in India and how special it was. And, some other stops that you've had along the way, Marquette, Georgia, all that. Do you ever get the itch to get back into coaching college basketball again? And tell me now, over the last few years, how has the new NIL rules and the transfer portal kind of changed, how you coach and approach college basketball?
Well, yeah, I don't know if it's an itch, because I miss the floor. I miss the floor with the players on a daily basis, and I still get some of it, and I still get to deal with far more than just the guys that are in the NBA, that are dealing with things in life. So I still have those relationships with the players, but what you miss is helping people solve problems. Right? You miss that. I miss that. I don't know if everybody does, but I miss that. I miss the floor. I miss the solving problems, the game planning, the film work, the processing basketball, the learning basketball. I still get that with television, and I enjoy it. Right? I without that, I'd be nuts. I mean, I'd lose my mind for sure. And so you miss that competition, right? Running and lifting weights and that kind of stuff. Yeah, I do that, but that's a tough competition, right? That's not the same. So you miss that. But I would coach again, but I'm not driven that I have to coach. I want to coach. I don't love the coaching profession. I didn't love it when I was in it. I love coaching. I didn't necessarily love the profession. We beat a lot of teams for players, and we lost some players because of the programs that were doing NIL before there was NIL. And that's reality. right?
Yeah.
That's reality. And that happened in Indiana just as much as anything. I mean, in there's guys that you get, there's guys that you don't get, and there's usually a story behind both, right? And it is what it is. It's not an excuse, it's a fact, right? It just becomes part of what it is. But for me, I love the daily process of getting guys better and putting together the team. So I would go back, and I think now with the NIL, I would enjoy that. I think I can live with the portal. See, my last year at Georgia was the first year of both, and we were still Zoom recruiting. And my last team that I coached at Indiana, I only had 2 players that I ever recruited in person. Everything else was off Zoom or off video because of the COVID rules. And the night COVID hit, we had just beaten Ole Miss, and we're getting ready to play Florida the next day, and we were starting to play pretty good basketball, right? And then all of a sudden, like, that's gone. And so not only did we get killed in the portal the first year and lose a lot of guys, but we didn't have any NIL. My last year at Georgia was the first year, but we had $4,200. We had 7 guys make $600 for doing a 3-hour clinic for local kids. A booster put it on, and our kids made $600, right? And then we had 2 more guys get $1,000. Oh, this is absolutely true. We had 2 more guys get $1,000 from Crystal Hamburgers for doing a social media ad. So when it was all said and done, we got $6,200. There's not an SEC program right now that's probably under $4 to $4.5 million.
Wow.
And there's some that there's probably a couple that don't have a budget, but there's also some that are in the 6, 7, 7.5 range. And that's just the way college basketball is. I mean, we'll look at Indiana. I don't know what the money is, but guaranteed they've got a bunch of it, right? And so to be in any environment right now, when you've coached one and dones, when you've coached guys that left after 2 years, I think I could handle that just fine. Because what you learn from coaching guys that are leaving early is you have to advance them. You have to expedite the process for them. And I love the evaluation. I certainly made mistakes every place I've been on evaluation, but we also hit it on evaluation. And so but the thing I love the most is finding something in guys, whether they're #1 player in the country like Anthony Edwards or 1, 2, 3 scholarship offers like some of the other guys, and coach them every day to be better and hold them accountable to what I think they need to become. So I would go back, but I don't want to go back where you don't have the alignment with the administration or the athletic director's got 1 foot out the door. I probably wouldn't have gone to Georgia if I thought my athletic director was going to retire within 2 years. I'd have gone to another school. But I don't begrudge Georgia because I'd have never coached Anthony Edwards and Nick Claxton without that. My son graduated from Georgia. So there's reasons for everything. But making the right choices is really, really important. So I like to think that I'm getting better every day. I understand basketball and see it as good as I've ever seen it in my mind. And I have an open mind to numerous things. And I think when you have that, because I've got friends that are out like, man, they're having trouble functioning, wondering where their next job and coaching is going to come. And I'm not like that. So, and I'm just not. And my faith doesn't put me there. And then my job and the things I'm trying to do don't put me there. But if I go back to coaching, I think I'd love it. And I think I'd flourish in it because I think I've been through so many different things. I think I could handle about whatever would come up.
Well, we wish you nothing but the best with whatever you decide to do in your future. I think, there's plenty of coaching left ahead if that's what you decide to do. And,
Sure.
We wish you nothing but the best. But last question for me before we wrap this up. What is your go-to spot food-wise, whether it's Bloomington, Indianapolis, but in Indiana, what was your go-to food spot that you just sometimes
I can answer that easy. There were so many good places. But if you drop me off in Indy and I could go one place, I'm going to Harry and Izzy's.
Okay.
Yeah, unbelievable.
I was wondering if we were going to get a Bloomington reference, like a Mother Bears or something like that.
No, I wasn't into Mother Bears. And I was never, I would say when we lived there, Malibu Grill.
Okay.
Yeah, I liked that. I mean, Mother Bears was fine, but we didn't go there that much. I liked the old place, Cafe Pizzeria, which shut down. I liked that, which was downtown. But like we weren't big food connoisseurs. Little Zagreb's, I mean, that was obviously great. So we'd go out the most when we'd have recruits in, but we had younger kids still at that point. So,
Right.
man, you could drive me through Little Caesars or Taco Bell and I'm going to be good, right? But if you could drop me off at any restaurant in America, I'm going to go with In-N-Out Burger. But if you dropped me off at Indy and I was going one place, it's Harry and Izzy's, no doubt.
Harry and Izzy's.
Either the one at the mall or the one downtown.
Okay. All right. Well, I respect it, Coach. So thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we sign off here?
No, I appreciate you having me. And I don't get back to the state of Indiana enough. Sometimes I do. And I always love it when I get back there. So I love watching the Pacers. I love watching the Indiana teams. I watch them now more from the view of obviously the being objective in the television world and things like that. But it's great. So I appreciate you guys having me.
Appreciate you, Coach. Thanks for coming on. Love your storytelling. Love your breakdown of the game, and look forward to seeing you more on ESPN and on that television. I'll be
all right. I appreciate it very much. Thank you, guys.
Yeah. Thanks for your time, Coach.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.